Thank you so much for that introduction. And it is so wonderful to meet so many wonderful researchers, old and new, some familiar faces, some new faces. So my name is Sonny Russell. As Irina said, I'm a research coordinator at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And I work under Dr. Julia Parrish-Morris, who's my PI. And we're collaborating with Florio, which is a virtual reality immersive company that aims to impart key skills as well as confidence, primarily targeted at autistic individuals. And the targeted skills that Florio focuses on ranges greatly. They have over 200 lessons in their app, and they range from building social connections to flexibility with travel to, of course, police safety, which is what I will be focusing on today. If I can get the slides to progress. There we go. Okay. So the goal of the study is to study the effectiveness of the Florio intervention via teletherapy. Also, everyone can see the presentation and hear me, right? Yes?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay, great. So we're looking, of course, at a lot of behavioral outcomes, and that includes fidgeting behavior, appropriate verbal response orienting, self-disclosure, which we do make optional for participants. We never want them to self-disclose if that will make them feel uncomfortable, but we've found that it actually helps a lot of participants feel really empowered during practice police officer interactions. And we also encourage them to ask before reaching for ID. And we also sort of code overall behavior. And we're also interested in gaining a lot of feedback. So we're getting feedback on, firstly, the virtual administration of the study. This is the first time that Florio has really administered a lesson primarily virtually. We had previous phases that I'll talk about in a bit that were administered in person. So they're hoping to expand their virtual administration of many of their lessons to teletherapy. So we're really encouraging participants to share what they like, as well as what they don't like about a teletherapy administration. And we're also, of course, interested in getting feedback on the app itself, whether that be what the lesson is instructing people to do, graphics, what the officers say, all sorts of things, so that we can sort of finalize the lessons before releasing them to the public. So some motivations for this study. If you live in the United States in particular, you know that American police interactions can be really, really stressful and challenging for anyone. And they pose particular challenges and difficulty, unfortunately, for autistic individuals for a myriad of reasons. And of course, before we continue with this presentation, I want to outline and mention that the onus should be on police officers as much, if not more, than autistic stakeholders. Particularly if you live in the United States, you'll know that there's a lot of red tape regarding police education around autism. So right now we're sort of focused on doing what we can with what's given to us, which is encouraging autistic individuals to learn about police interactions as they stand now. Of course, we hope that police education expands and is more open in the future to learning about autism. But right now, unfortunately, police education around autism is very limited. So we're focusing on keeping people safe and comfortable if they are to interact with officers. So in the United States, 1 in 5 autistic adolescents before the age of 20 will be stopped and questioned by a police officer, according to a study from 2016, which is quite a lot. That's a pretty high rate of likelihood of interacting with an officer. So it can be really helpful to practice these skills so that you're not caught off guard. And then very few options exist for autistic individuals to practice interacting with police. Many of the opportunities, at least in America, are either role playing or sort of paper and pencil listing things that you should and shouldn't do, which, as you can imagine, might not be as effective as an immersive intervention such as virtual reality. And of course, as we're all too familiar with, the COVID-19 pandemic has really exacerbated depression and anxiety amongst everyone, but particularly autistic individuals have noted a really sharp spike in depression and anxiety. And it's also rendered it very challenging or nearly impossible to safely implement in-person behavioral supports. So we were really excited to be able to get this off the ground as a tele-administration so quickly. All right, and just to summarize some previous phases that led us to where we are right now, we've completed a safety and feasibility trial, which is phase 1 of our NIH grant, basically proving that there was no serious adverse effects and that it's feasible and in fact quite engaging for autistic individuals. And then we recently, I think within the last 2 years, completed our in-person randomized control trial. So that was phase 2A. And you can see some outcomes on the right here. Following interventions, participants rated themselves as doing better during police officer interactions, which is great, but they also reported feeling better, which is really important. We are emphasizing comfortability as much as we are improving specific skill sets that police officers might be looking for. And then you can see we rated a few metrics, so overall behavior, appropriate response, and that's primarily verbal response, fidgeting scores, as well as orienting. And these three in particular improved significantly in the condition from pre to post intervention, that's in the Florio condition. So we had an assessment before the intervention as well as after the intervention. And you can see that there were improvements generally according to time, but we also saw a very sharp increase in improvement in fidgeting score, which was really exciting to see. And we also collected responses from police officers following the interaction. So we had real security guards and police officers conducting the assessments post-intervention, and they also rated people based on a video of the first intervention versus what they just experienced in front of them. So that was an in-person assessment, and they significantly rated fidgeting as much improved. And again, I know we've been talking a lot about stimming behaviors and how they can be really important and helpful for autistic individuals. So just a reminder that this is sort of targeted at safety. Unfortunately, the political state that the United States is in right now, it is sometimes dangerous for autistic individuals to be stimming in front of police officers. So that's why we encourage people to self-disclose, to sort of give the officer a little bit more of an understanding. But we understand that, of course, mental health should always come first, and we encourage participants to not take part in our study if they think that limiting certain behaviors might be a detriment to their mental health. All right, moving forward, the procedure for this current tele-administration. So participants were mailed a headset, as you can see here, to keep, as well as an iPhone equipped with the Florio app. And study staff, which was primarily myself, controlled the phone that the participant had remotely using a paired iPad. So both devices were on Wi-Fi, and as long as they were paired, they had to use the same version of the app. I could control what the officer did and sort of what the participant saw from Philadelphia. And participants in the intervention group, of course, received those lessons. They were about an hour long, and they each received 3, and they were each separated by approximately 1 week. And then treatment as usual individuals did not receive lessons in the VR, but we did speak about police safety at the end of the study so that they could still leave with some knowledge. And then the lessons targeted skills, including self-disclosure of an autism diagnosis, again, optional, maintaining eye contact, as well as following directions, things like showing your hands. We had them mime showing a bag in case they had a bag on them, standing up, sitting down, that sort of thing. And you can see here a quick screen grab of the iPad. I'm going to show that more in detail on the next slide. So continued about the procedure. Again, all participants underwent 3 VR-based assessments. So those were inside the virtual reality, and they're meant to simulate a short, so 3 to 5 minute police officer interaction. It consisted of asking questions, an opportunity for a self-disclosure, showing ID, as well as a sit and wait period. So inside the VR, the police officer would go to the cop car, pretending to be conversing with other officers while the participant practiced sitting and waiting. And those assessments were 1 pre-lesson, so before any intervention, immediately post the last lesson, and then we also did a follow-up assessment 3 to 4 weeks after that second assessment, or lessons if they were in the intervention group, to see how well these skills were maintained. And assessments were recorded via the video conferencing platform. We primarily use Cisco WebEx so that we could code for things like fidgeting, movement, things like that. And then we also recorded the viewfinder so we can see where they're looking and orienting behavior. And to give you a little explanation of the screen that you're seeing, so this is a screen grab in the middle of a lesson. So you can see the targeted behavior is following directions. There are different skill levels. So as they progressed through the study, it went from easy to medium to hard. And that was determined by the amount of background noise to distract the participant, the tone of the police officer, as well as the number of following directions or the number of specific skills prompted in the lessons. And we also had questions specific to either adults or adolescents. You can see that we have some acknowledge and repeat buttons. Acknowledge was primarily used when a participant would spontaneously self-disclose. So we only encouraged them to self-disclose or sort of prompted them in 1 lesson, but a lot of individuals really enjoyed self-disclosing. It sort of, as I mentioned, gave them a bit of agency, and they liked feeling empowered in that way. So if they were to spontaneously self-disclose in the middle of a lesson, we would just have the police officer respond by saying, okay, or thank you. Repeating the question, self-explanatory. If the participant didn't hear the officer, we could have them repeat it. Good response just means that they made a good response, and they can, the police officer would then move on to the next question. And then the prompt button has various prompts that sort of edit minor incorrect behaviors. So for instance, if the participant wasn't looking at the officer would say, can you look at me when I'm talking to you? Similar with fidgeting behavior, the police officer might say, can you please sit still while I'm talking to you, etc., for about 6 different prompts. And then poor response, if they have a really negative reaction to whatever the officer asks them, it's just logged as a poor response, and the officer sort of has a scripted harumph, and then they move forward. And if there are 3 poor responses in a row, we actually have a simulated arrest. They're not handcuffed or anything. The screen just goes black, and when the visual comes back on, they're in the back of a police car. And then we have a discussion about what happened, what we could do better next time, and the importance of police safety. So some challenges as well as benefits of pivoting to a tele-administration. A lot of benefits that we particularly heard praises of from families included increased flexibility during virtual visits. It was really great for our participants to be able to do the lessons from their bedroom or with their dog around the corner. It really created a sense of safety and comfortability, and I think a lot of them expressed that they might have been a little less flexible if it had been somewhere like Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, which is unfamiliar and has a lot of novel sensory stimuli outside of the VR. We also were able to get greater geographic diversity, and I'll mention that in a little bit. And it was more accessible for a lot of families. They didn't have to worry about driving into Philadelphia, taking work off, all of that kind of stuff. We were much more flexible with timing, considering we didn't need to be in an office or a clinical setting. And of course, we had a lot of challenges and limitations. A lot of them were logistical challenges. For instance, remote pairing required a good bit of work on the behalf of the participant. They had to be on Wi-Fi. Sometimes the Wi-Fi connection wasn't good, and so the pairing wouldn't work. And of course, there was orienting issues where the participant was supposed to be facing forward, and the app would have a bug where they were facing backward. A lot of just silly little bugs that we had to work through as the study progressed. Getting materials to participants occasionally posed a problem. There was one time where an iPhone was stolen by a UPS worker, which was quite the bummer. But that said, we have only lost one iPhone. The rest of the issues were mostly like delays and frustrations from participants on occasion when we had to reschedule a visit. There was also much more administrative responsibility and preparation on behalf of the participants. So they had to make sure to get the package, they had to turn the phone on, connect it to Wi-Fi. So compared to an in-person administration where a research assistant or coordinator would be able to do all the prep, like getting them logged on and making sure that the iPhone is sitting correctly in the headset, a lot of that was on the participant. And communication also differences greatly in teletherapy. So it was a little bit more difficult for me to explain to the participant how to arrange the iPhone in the headset. That said, we tried to make all of this as easy as possible. We gave a lot of info sheets, and we also created stickers so that the sticker on the phone could line up to the sticker on the headset, so that it was as easy as possible to set that all up. And of course, there was no opportunity for an in-person police assessment. So whereas in the last phase, we were able to work with police officers and security officers to see how well the skills would translate from a virtual reality intervention into an in-person assessment, everything was an online assessment, which also meant that there were some unforeseen behaviors like adjusting the headset, moving uncomfortably because it was uncomfortable on the head, that sort of affected the way that the participant would move because of the virtual administration compared to an in-person administration. All right, and then I'm hoping this will work. If not, not the end of the world, but I have a quick demo of the Florio lesson. So I'm just gonna play a little bit of that. I don't wanna take up too much time, but this will just give you all a little bit of background.
Our police encounters lessons are the lessons that we're developing with the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, the Center for Autism Research, as part of our NIH grant. And we have 2 different types of these lessons. In level 1 and level 2, there are 19 different lessons that are designed to practice responding to a greeting from a police officer and then a series of questions that are posed by the police officer. And within these 19 lessons, there are different types of distractions. And I'm going to click into the first in the series. This one does not have a lot of distractions here. The types of distractions that we do add are things like more background noise. Sometimes there are cars driving by on the street here or pedestrians that are walking by. There might be a police car down the street with its lights on. Sometimes it's nighttime. Occasionally there is a person that sits over here on the bench, which can add another level of anxiety for the learner because they feel like they're being watched. But in any case, in this set of lessons, we give the coach the tools to puppeteer the police officer because the goal is for the learner to role play as if this was a real life scenario. So I'll start the lesson here.
Hey there.
And we're greeted by the police officer. He said, hey there. And so if the learner doesn't respond or says something that's hard to understand, the coach could use one of those orange prompts in the center of the screen there. But hopefully our learner here said hi or hey or his favorite way of saying hi.
Can I talk to you a sec?
We have some questions like this one, which can be difficult to answer for some of our more literal learners because the
All right, so that's sort of a quick peek into what the lessons look like. That's a slightly outdated version. As I showed you in that screen grab earlier, we have a slightly updated version with more prompts, but you can sort of see what the visuals look like and what the immersion is like. So it's only audio and visual. There are no handhelds. All right, and moving right along. Maybe, yes. Okay, so some preliminary results. Despite many logistical challenges, we've had 47 autistic adults from 15 states throughout the US that have participated so far with a pretty high rate of data collection success. So data loss that we did have occurred pretty much exclusively due to technical issues, whether that's some video recording errors or internet connection issues. And in addition to having pretty high data collection success rate, we also got really wonderful feedback from participants about both the intervention as well as the video conference format. And the feedback about the app itself was overall really positive from enrolled participants. Most of the criticisms were focused on visuals, saying that the visuals were outdated. A lot of people cited GTA from the early aughts, or small visual bugs. For instance, the traffic lights could occasionally get stuck on yellow, or people would sort of pass through each other and one would go transparent. But overall, very overwhelmingly positive feedback. And there was a bit of a selection bias there. The people that enrolled tend to be more eager and excited about virtual reality and excited to learn about police safety. We did occasionally receive some feedback during screening calls where people mentioned that they weren't very interested in the virtual reality because they weren't interested in sort of lessons that probed or suggested that autistic individuals alter their behavior to appease neurotypicals or to sort of pass as neurotypical. So we are absolutely taking that into account, and I'll talk a little bit about that in my next step slide. So a general summary, Florio has the potential to provide really motivating and comfortable practice engaging in police officer interactions. We had a lot of people sort of during the visit say like, why am I having so much fun? Or this is like a video game, I don't want it to end, something like that, which is really encouraging and sort of makes it more likely that they'll remember all the lessons that they learned. And the virtual environment also allows for really flexible, realistic simulations that are virtually risk-free. So the only real risk is participants getting dizzy or having an adverse reaction from virtual reality itself. But it's really valuable to have sort of a logistically safe interaction with police where they can experiment and practice self-disclosing, practice seeing people in uniform. We had a lot of participants say that they typically have a lot of anxiety around members of authority. So it was really helpful to sort of get that exposure in a safe simulated environment. And some next steps. So like I said, we got a lot of great feedback, both from people that were really enthusiastic about the intervention and people that had some qualms. So our next step is to create and pilot a police-focused training module with input from autistic stakeholders as well as police officers. So we're right now working with 3 stakeholders to draft these lessons and to identify priorities. The grant that we have is very small, so the pilot for the police-focused training module, which will be ideally administered to police to learn about autism and increase empathy around autism, will be pretty small. So we want to make sure that what we do focus on is echoing the stakeholders and what autistic individuals want to see. And we've also been conducting an online survey in tandem with that police safety module study to conduct information about what autistic individuals feel is important for police to know about autistic individuals, and just how autistic individuals feel about police. So much of the survey will be used to sort of help us form this police-focused training module. And we're also really passionate about making VR accessible. So we're hoping to get Florio in public libraries. Our sort of headset-only VR experience makes it pretty feasible to get the materials in a library, similar to how you would have like museum passes in a library. We're trying to work with Philadelphia Public Libraries to see if we can get some headsets implemented in libraries that people can check out with their library card, which would be really exciting. All right, and I think that's pretty much it from me. So I have some acknowledgements here. I just want to point out my mentor, Dr. Julia Parrish-Morris. She's in that lovely striped dress. And we have a lot of thank yous, the police department, the Center for Autism Research, as well as various foundations and the NIH for funding. And thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Again, I'm honored to be speaking. And if you have any questions, I would love to hear that.